"I'm sorry, but we can't just hand out cash to anyone who walks in," the bank manager said, her tone sharp as she slid the woman's withdrawal slip back across the counter. The words echoed through the polished lobby of the bank, where a few staff members had started to gather, exchanging knowing glances. One young teller leaned toward a colleague, whispering just loud enough to be heard, "Yeah, right. She doesn't even look like someone who has that kind of money." As the quiet chuckles rippled through the group, a woman stood silently at the counter, her posture straight, her eyes steady. She didn't flinch, didn't argue. She simply watched, letting the scene unfold around her. What these employees didn't realize was that the woman they had just tried to dismiss was not only a customer, but their boss. This is the story of Angela Freeman, a woman who went from standing behind a teller counter to running one of the largest financial institutions in the country. But today she isn't just a CEO. She's a mirror reflecting the quiet biases hidden in plain sight. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been judged before someone even knew your name, this story is for you. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience and justice. Because sometimes the most profound lessons come not from those who shout the loudest, but from those who watch, learn, and rise. The morning sun painted the glass walls of the downtown bank with golden streaks, casting long reflections across the polished floor. Angela Freeman walked in, confident, poised, and dressed in an elegant but understated navy blue suit. Her heels clicked softly with each step, not seeking attention, but commanding quiet respect from anyone listening. She wasn't new to this branch. In fact, it was one she had visited years ago before the title CEO had ever graced her business cards. Today, though, she had come without appointment, without announcement. Just a woman needing to make a simple withdrawal. Approaching the counter, she was greeted not with warmth, but with suspicion. Behind the thick glass stood a young teller named Beth, her shoulders tense, eyes darting toward the back office as Angela slid over her ID and account number. "I'd like to make a withdrawal. $30,000, please," Angela said, calm and clear. Beth stared at her lips, slightly parted. One moment, ma'am." She disappeared to the back without further word. Angela waited. A full 5 minutes passed before Mark, the assistant manager, emerged. His expression was polite, but there was something artificial behind it, like someone trying too hard to look in control. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he began, "but we'll need to ask you a few questions first. Large cash withdrawals trigger certain alerts. Just a formality." Angela nodded. "That's fine, go ahead." Mark glanced at her ID again, then at her. "What's the purpose of the withdrawal?" Angela's brows lifted slightly. "I wasn't aware that was necessary to share." He offered a tight-lipped smile. "It's bank policy, ma'am. We have to ensure that all funds being withdrawn aren't being used for anything suspicious." Angela paused. "It's my account, my money." Mark didn't blink. "We understand, but we also have to protect the institution." Behind them, 2 employees had stopped what they were doing, clearly listening in. One of them, Richard, chuckled under his breath. Angela caught the sound. She turned slowly toward him. "Something funny?" she asked. He shrugged, trying to look innocent. No, just reminded me of something I saw on the news." Angela said nothing. Her eyes remained steady. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Mark stepped back and said, "I'm sorry, but without further documentation or a business justification, we won't be able to complete this withdrawal today." Angela's expression didn't change, but the silence that followed did. It grew heavier by the second. She collected her ID, slid it back into her wallet, and looked around the lobby. 2 customers watched. One looked away. Angela stood tall, not defensive, not angry, just centered like a storm forming under still waters. "Is that your final answer?" she asked, voice low but piercing. Mark hesitated. "It's not personal, it's just protocol." Angela gave the faintest nod, then turned to leave. But before she reached the door, she paused. She looked back over her shoulder, her voice calm but laced with something deeper. "Disappointment, I'll be sure to follow up." And with that, she stepped out quietly, gracefully, but not defeated. Because what they didn't know was that the woman they just refused service to owned the very building they were standing in. If this story stirred something in you about power, prejudice, or the quiet strength of knowing who you are, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because the world needs more stories where truth speaks louder than titles. Angela didn't storm out. She didn't raise her voice. But something about the calmness in her exit unsettled everyone who had been watching. As she walked past the double glass doors, she could feel eyes behind her. Not just watching, but calculating. The kind of stare that clung to your back long after you've turned away. She knew that feeling. It wasn't just curiosity, it was fear dressed in authority, and it had followed her all her life. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual pace horns, blaring footsteps, rushing conversations rising and falling like tides, but in Angela's mind, everything was quiet. Focused, she didn't walk far, just across the street into a cafe with tall windows that gave her a clear view of the bank entrance. She ordered tea, sat by the glass, and waited. It didn't take long. Inside the branch, panic had started to ripple. Mark had retreated into the back office. Jessica, the branch manager, was on the phone, her face flushed, voice hushed and sharp. Richard paced near the side desk, occasionally glancing toward the front entrance, like he expected Angela to return with police. Or worse, Beth looked pale. She tapped nervously on her keyboard, clearly trying to look busy. Angela sipped her tea, eyes unmoving. They didn't know she was still watching. They didn't know she never really left. Inside, Jessica ended the call and turned to Mark. "Find out who she is. I want her flagged in the system. Next time she shows up, we don't even let her pass the front counter." Mark hesitated. "Should we involve corporate?" Jessica narrowed her eyes. "Not yet. If they find out we messed up, that's worse." Angela's gaze sharpened. She wasn't just being treated as an inconvenience. She was being handled like a threat. She opened her phone, tapped into a secure app, one reserved for internal access. A few strokes of her finger, and she pulled up the branch's complaint history. Dozens of records, many from Black or Latino customers. Most unresolved, most quietly archived. She took a breath, then opened a secure cloud folder and uploaded the full interaction video she had captured from her phone earlier. Not just for legal backup, but for something far more permanent. Accountability. Back inside, Jessica said quietly to Richard, "These types always push for trouble." Next thing you know, they're calling the news. Richard scoffed. "She's not gonna do anything." "She didn't even raise her voice," Jessica replied coldly. "That's the dangerous kind. They don't yell. They plan," and that was the only thing Jessica got right all day. Angela placed her tea down, opened her calendar, and moved up a meeting that was supposed to happen next quarter. Internal audit, central branch visit. Effective immediately, she smiled faintly. They thought they were watching her, but she had already put them under full surveillance. Long before the title Chief Executive Officer followed her name like a badge of power. Angela Freeman was just another girl behind the counter. 22 years old, fresh out of college. Nervous hands, polished smile, and a head full of dreams no one took seriously. Her first job, teller right here at the very same banking chain. Back then, she wore the same kind of name tag Beth now wore, answered to managers like Jessica, and smiled through assumptions she never earned. She still remembered the first customer who refused to look her in the eye. The man who held his withdrawal slip at arm's length, never once addressing her by name, just tapping the glass and saying, "Faster." She still remembered the coworker who joked, "You speak really well for someone like you," Angela never forgot. Not the stares, not the tone, not the quiet calculations of people trying to decide if she fit the image of someone who belonged in finance. She didn't yell then either. She worked harder than most, longer than required. She earned certifications after hours, took night classes in economics and leadership. And when she was told, "You're good, but not quite leadership material," she replied with nothing but action, applying to every internal posting, every program, every opportunity, until saying no to her required more explanation than yes. Years passed, she earned her MBA, led a regional turnaround team. Then came a position at corporate VP of strategy, then senior VP, and finally the room where no one questioned her anymore, the boardroom, where she was voted unanimously as the next CEO of the institution she had once served minimum wage hours for, but she never announced it like others might have. No social media parades, no gala. She simply got to work. That's why when Mark questioned her withdrawal, when Jessica narrowed her eyes with suspicion, when Richard smirked, Angela didn't need to prove anything. She had already done that. Over decades. So no, her silence wasn't weakness. It was restraint sharpened by memory. Because Angela Freeman didn't come from privilege. She came from that counter, from behind the glass, and she knew better than anyone. Sometimes the most powerful voice in the room is the one that doesn't need to shout anymore. Angela never planned to go to Harvard, not because she didn't dream big, but because for a long time she didn't think she was allowed to. No one in her neighborhood had ever made it that far. But one rejection from an internal promotion at the bank, worded just vaguely enough to sting, changed everything. "You're doing great," her manager had said, "but we're looking for someone with a more executive presence." Angela smiled, nodded, and went home that night to research MBA programs. She applied to Harvard, not with hope, but with fury, wrapped in discipline. She was accepted. And when she stepped onto that campus crisp, leaves crunching beneath her heels, she didn't feel imposter syndrome. She felt readiness. Every lecture wasn't just theory, it was a blueprint. Every case study, a future situation she might face. And she absorbed it all, not to win debates in class, but to walk back into the boardroom one day and build something better. She graduated top of her cohort. But Angela never became the kind of executive who posted selfies at the top floor with champagne flutes. Instead, she walked the branches, quietly unannounced. She visited offices in low-income neighborhoods and affluent districts alike, listening more than speaking, watching how customers were greeted, observing who got extra smiles and who got extra scrutiny, because Angela knew that leadership without observation was just decoration. And that the systems that seemed fine on paper were often broken in practice, especially at the level where no one bothers to complain because they are used to being ignored. That's why she noticed it early at this particular branch. The way call times were longer when the name on the account didn't sound right. The way internal memos about high-risk clients always seemed to skew one shade. The way promotions came faster for those who fit a certain mold. So she watched track, logged not to punish, but to prepare. Because Angela didn't believe in fixing what wasn't broken. She believed in uncovering what had been hidden too long so she could break it herself and rebuild it better. And that's why when she walked into that branch and was treated like a stranger, she didn't flinch. She had seen it coming, because while they thought they were looking down on a nobody, she was looking right back with data, with patience, and with a long memory. When Angela was named CEO, there was no parade, no viral press release, no celebratory post with gold confetti, or a glass ceiling shattered headline. Instead, she sent a quiet internal memo to all staff. Leadership begins with listening. "I look forward to hearing from you, Angela Freeman, Chief Executive Officer." Her inbox overflowed. Hundreds of emails, some congratulatory, some anonymous, filled with stories of biased silence and long-held frustration. She didn't delete them. She archived every single one. And then she made a decision that no one saw coming. She put away her title, her nameplate, even her power suit, and she walked back into her own branches, disguised as just another woman needing help. Sometimes she wore a cardigan and old heels. Sometimes she came in with no makeup, no jewelry, and a slightly frayed tote bag. She used a dormant personal account, one with minimal funds, so there'd be no corporate flags, no alerts, nothing to give her away. And in every visit, she asked for basic service, cash withdrawals, account questions, wire transfers. And in every visit, she took notes, because what she discovered couldn't be found in spreadsheets. It was in the hesitation before a greeting, the lack of eye contact, the unsolicited. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" It was in the way some managers puffed their chest when explaining basic policy to a woman they thought they outranked. Angela didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She documented, because a report can say customer satisfaction is 86%. But Angela wanted to know what happened to the other 14%. That's why she kept going back, quietly, repeatedly, until the patterns stopped being assumptions and became evidence. So when she walked into that branch last week and Mark questioned her withdrawal, and Jessica looked at her like a problem to manage, and Richard rolled his eyes. It wasn't the first time she'd seen it. It was just the last time she'd let it happen without consequence. Because Angela wasn't just a CEO, she was a mirror held up to the face of a system that didn't realize it was being watched by its own reflection. There's a reason Angela chose that branch. It wasn't random. She had been watching it for months, small things at first. Things that wouldn't raise alarms on a dashboard, but to Angela, who had lived both sides of the counter, they were loud enough to echo. Reports from that location were always off. Unusual delays for certain clients, discrepancies in service ratings when filtered by zip code, and one line in a quarterly staff evaluation caught her eye. Manager excels at protecting the bank's image and clientele quality. What did that mean? What kind of image? What kind of clientele? Angela dug deeper. She reviewed a sampling of calls, anonymized transaction notes, customer support transcripts. And while nothing was explicitly wrong, something felt deeply wrong underneath. It wasn't about numbers, it was about tone. That's when she made the decision. No memos, no audit warnings. She would walk in herself, not as CEO, as Angela the customer. No entourage, no scheduled visit with coffee and smiles. Just a withdrawal request. It was the oldest trick in her own playbook used once by mentors who taught her. If you want to know how your system truly works, walk into it without your name, so she did. She chose the date, chose the branch, picked an outfit that was elegant, yes, but plain, and she walked in knowing exactly what would happen. Not hoping for kindness, but preparing for confirmation. Because Angela understood something few executives do. Bias doesn't always shout, sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it says we're just following policy, and sometimes it shows you exactly who thinks they're safe when no one's watching. So when they looked past her, talked around her, and questioned if the money was hers, she wasn't surprised, she was ready, because she hadn't come to be served. She had come to see them exactly as they were when they thought no one important was watching. Angela didn't just stand in line that day. She watched every shift in body language, every raised eyebrow, every false smile that curled a little tighter when the skin across the counter grew darker. The branch wasn't crowded, just 5 or 6 customers inside, enough to see a pattern, but enough to feel it. A white man in a tailored suit walked in 10 minutes after her. No waiting. Greeted by name, his coffee order already in hand. Smiles, laughter, a handshake from Mark himself. Angela looked down at her phone, opened the stopwatch app, and tapped start. A black woman in business attire entered shortly after she was dressed. Sharply, clearly professional, Angela noted. She waited 17 minutes before anyone greeted her. When she asked to speak to a manager about a loan issue, Beth told her to call the hotline. She left with nothing but a brochure. Then came a Latino man in construction boots. He spoke in clear English, though slightly accented. Jessica glanced at him from across the lobby and didn't even acknowledge his nod. He approached the counter and waited 10 minutes. No response until he finally turned around and walked out, shoulders slumped. The quiet kind of shame only familiar to those who've learned when they're not welcome. Angela watched it all. Her fingers trembled, not with anger but recognition. This wasn't just one rude moment. This was design masked as oversight, and it was happening inside her institution. She looked around and realized there were cameras everywhere, security footage running 24/7, but they weren't used to protect the customer. They were used to protect the bank from accountability. Angela had seen enough. She reached into her bag, pulled out her personal device, and began logging notes into her encrypted audit journal. Every interaction, every timestamp. This wasn't a feeling anymore. It was evidence, a record of how bias doesn't arrive in shouting matches, but in who gets seen first, who gets told to wait, who leaves feeling less human than when they walked in. And that's when she knew. She wasn't just documenting injustice for policy change, she was building the case for reconstruction. Angela stepped forward in the line Mark noticed, not with recognition, but with that same dismissive flick of the eyes he'd given the construction worker earlier. He whispered something to Richard. They both chuckled. Richard leaned back in his chair and folded his arms, watching her like a security risk, not a client. Angela kept her posture straight, composed, almost regal in restraint. Finally, Mark called out. Next, she approached, slowly sliding over her ID and account information. I'd like to make a withdrawal, she said, voice calm. $30,000. Mark didn't hide his skepticism. He took her ID, scanned it, then looked up with a half smile that didn't touch his eye. That's quite a bit, he said. What's the money for? Angela's eyes didn't waver. Personal reasons. Mark blinked. Right, well, we'll need verification. Large amounts like this aren't typically withdrawn in cash without prior notice. Angela nodded once. Is that policy? He hesitated. It's at the branch's discretion. Behind him, Richard smirked, muttering, Here we go again. Angela heard it, but she said nothing. Jessica stepped out of the office, catching the tension. She scanned Angela from head to toe, the way some people assess not a person but a threat to their comfort zone. Her voice was sweet. Too sweet, ma'am. Is there something we can assist you with? Angela turned to face her fully. I believe I'm being assisted, she replied. Or am I mistaken? Jessica's smile thinned. Well, we just want to make sure everything is in order. This is an unusual request, Angela replied, still even tone. It's my account, my fund, and I'm following every rule in your system. Jessica glanced at Mark. Perhaps we need to place a hold on the account until we confirm identity. Angela tilted her head slightly. You have two forms of ID, a verified account number, and my transaction history. What more do you require? Blood that silenced the room. For a moment, then Jessica offered a tight smile and leaned in just slightly. I'm not sure where you're from, she said softly, but here we run a tight ship. We don't just hand out cash to anyone who walks in off the street. And there it was, the mask slipping, the superiority bleeding through the cracks of professionalism. Angela stepped back, gathered her belongings, and locked eyes with all three. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't make a scene. She simply said, you should remember this moment. Not because I'll repeat it, but because you will. And with that, she turned and walked toward the door. Three stunned employees frozen behind her. They didn't know who she was, but they were about to. Angela hadn't even reached the door when Jessica called out behind her. You know what she said, stepping forward? Let's just save each other the time. Angela turned slowly, expression unreadable. Jessica crossed her arms, standing now in front of Mark and Richard like a self-appointed gatekeeper. This bank isn't for people who cause trouble. Angela raised an eyebrow. Trouble, Jessica smirked, questioning everything, demanding 30 grand in cash with no notice. You're lucky we didn't call security, Richard chimed in, chuckling. Yeah, maybe she thinks this is one of those get-rich scams. Angela didn't move, didn't blink. Jessica stepped closer, voice just loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. Look, ma'am, wherever you came from, maybe that kind of attitude worked. But here, we don't just serve anyone who walks in thinking they're entitled to special treatment. Angela's face remained calm, but her silence now had teeth. Jessica kept going as if the more she spoke, the more control she felt. Honestly, if you're really trying to withdraw that kind of money, I'd suggest you go somewhere else, somewhere more appropriate. She emphasized the last word like a final cut. Angela's eyes scanned the lobby. Customers had stopped pretending not to listen. Some shifted uncomfortably. One woman stood near the door, frozen mid-exit. Jessica took a final breath and delivered the blow without hesitation. We simply don't serve people like you here. A hush fell thick, sharp. Suffocating, Angela stepped forward, not with anger, but with something stronger, authority in waiting. She looked at Jessica for a long moment, then said quietly, I see. She turned to leave once more, this time not because she was dismissed, but because she had seen everything she needed to see. And Jessica, for all her bravado, felt something twist in her chest, because for the first time she noticed something in Angela's gaze, not fear, not outrage, but control, the kind of control you only have when you own more than just your dignity. You own the very walls people try to trap you in. As Angela reached the front doors, her hand barely touched the handle when Jessica called out once again, this time, with a tone soaked in condescension, masked as suggestion. You know, she began brushing imaginary lint from her blazer. There's a branch not far from here, 16th and Maple smaller. Bit more, community-based. Angela turned halfway just enough to see her. Jessica smiled like it was kindness, but the room heard the insult beneath. They're better equipped to assist someone like you. Someone like you. The words didn't fall. They landed like a brick through stained glass. Angela's gaze swept slowly across the room, not to make a scene, but to register the moment Mark stood, arms crossed. Richard looked away, suddenly interested in a pen on his desk. Even Beth, the young teller, was motionless, caught between guilt and silence. Jessica, meanwhile, was satisfied, as if she had solved a customer service issue with diplomacy, not discrimination. Angela took a breath. Then slowly she reached into her purse and retrieved her phone. She didn't raise it, didn't record a confrontation. She simply opened a secure folder labeled Site Audit, Confidential, and tapped Begin Recording, not for drama, but for documentation. Because some moments aren't for going viral, some are for evidence. She slipped the phone back inside screen, still lit mic, still listening. Jessica tilted her head. Is there anything else, ma'am? Angela responded with a small, deliberate smile. Yes, she said gently. I'd like to speak to your regional director, Jessica scoffed. That would be me today. Angela paused, nodding once. Then I'll be in touch with someone above you. Jessica's jaw tightened. That won't change anything. Angela held her gaze in reply. Steady as stone. Oh, I think it will. Then she walked out again. But this time the air didn't feel like retreat. It felt like the beginning of a reckoning. And deep inside, Jessica felt it too. She didn't know who the woman was, but something in her voice, in her calm, in her certainty, spoke louder than any threat, and it whispered the one thing Jessica had never been trained to handle: consequences. The moment Angela stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, she didn't fumble with her purse. She didn't pace, she didn't sigh. She just pulled out her phone calmly, intentionally, and scrolled to a contact labeled only Diane P. Palm. Direct line. She tapped it. The line rang once, twice, then picked up. Diane Porter came the voice on the other end, sharp, efficient, no nonsense, Senior Vice President of Risk and Compliance. A woman who didn't waste time because her job was to stop legal fires before they reached the public. Angela didn't bother with pleasantries. She simply said, "It's me." Silence, then a shift in tone. "Angela, is everything all right?" Angela watched through the bank's glass windows as Jessica leaned on the counter, laughing at something Richard said. "No," Angela replied. "I need a full branch audit initiated within the hour. Surveillance footage, employee records, customer complaint, archives, everything from the last 18 months. Diane straightened on the other end of the call. "Which branch?" Angela gave the address. Diane paused. "Wait, you were at that location today?" Angela's voice lowered, precise. "Yes, as a client." The weight of that sentence sunk fast. "Oh my God," Diane whispered. "They didn't know who you were," Angela answered with a question. "Do we still log branch performance metrics on bias indicators?" "Yes, of course." "And do we track employee dismissals related to racial profiling?" "We do." "Good," Angela said, "because you're about to need those reports." Inside the bank, Beth looked nervously toward the window, catching a glimpse of Angela standing alone, phone to her ear, expression unreadable. Jessica laughed again, oblivious. Angela continued, "I want the board notified. Pull the security footage. Mark Richard and Jessica's files, flag them. Any related complaints over the last year, especially unresolved ones. Send them to my office." Diane was already typing. "Do you want me to escalate to media control?" Angela shook her head. "Not yet. Let's give them the dignity of falling quietly first." Then she paused and added, "For now," she ended the call with two words Diane hadn't heard since the last executive crisis. "It's time." And with that, Angela slipped her phone back into her purse, turned, and began walking not away, but towards something bigger. Because what started with a refused withdrawal was about to become a full system withdrawal of silence. Back at headquarters, Diane Porter moved fast. Her fingers tapped commands into the compliance dashboard like a conductor guiding a silent orchestra. Screens lit up in front of her: branch logs, employee records, internal chat audits. Her heart beat louder than the clicking keys. She had worked under Angela for years. She knew her well. Angela didn't escalate easily. She didn't call without cause. And when she said, "It's time," it wasn't a warning. It was a verdict. "Pull footage from the past, 72 hours, Diane said sharply to her assistant. "Surveillance angles, lobby teller, windows, private office entries, full audio if available." "Yes, ma'am." "Flag all files with keywords, withdrawal denial, customer complaint, and racial profiling. Start with the names." Angela gave Jessica, Mark, and Richard. "Dig deep." As the server's journeyed, one screen lit up with live camera access. Diane zoomed into the lobby of the targeted branch. There they were, Jessica chatting with Mark, both oblivious, Richard tossing a pen in the air, still smirking like he'd won something. In the background, Beth frozen, eyes flickering toward the glass windows like she knew something had shifted. Diane leaned in closer. She clicked playback. 2 hours earlier, Angela walking in, shoulders back. Calm alone, Jessica's first glance, disinterest, Mark's posture closed off. Richard's reaction condescending, smirk again. Audio played through the system, and Diane listened, face tightening with each clipped sentence. "What's the money for? Do you have business justification? Maybe go somewhere more appropriate." Then came the line that made Diane's fingers stop cold. "We don't serve people like you." The room went silent. Diane didn't look away. She just whispered to herself. They said that to her. She picked up the phone again. "Compliance. This is SVP Porter. I need the executive committee on standby in 30 minutes, but ma'am, there now." She clicked over to another tab. Angela's secure folder was syncing live audio files, notes, tags, evidence. And still Diane knew. Angela wasn't doing this just for herself. She was doing this for every client who'd ever walked out feeling smaller than when they came in. Inside the branch, the screens blinked, the cameras kept rolling. And the system, so good at hiding things behind corporate policy, was now wide open. Angela had flipped the switch, and there would be no going back. The boardroom was soundproof, elegant, and intimidating by design. 12 chairs, polished mahogany table, a 180-inch screen flickering silently to life. Only minutes ago, the room had hosted a quarterly planning session. Charts, predictions, smiles. Now silence, cold, dense, humbling. Diane stood at the head of the room, remote. In hand, lips pressed thin on the screen, Angela's recorded visit played frame by frame. Jessica's words echoed, "We don't serve people like you here." The air tightened like a noose around every neck in the room. No one interrupted. Not when Richard laughed, not when Mark dismissed the ID, not when Angela stood there being handled like a criminal at her own bank. It wasn't just embarrassing, it was catastrophic. The chairman leaned forward, stunned. "This is current, not archival footage," Diane replied. Without blinking, "That was this morning," another board member whispered. My God, they didn't recognize her. Diane nodded once. "No, they didn't." Someone else stood pacing. "Does the press know?" "Not yet," Diane replied. "But we're sitting on a live fuse. Once this hits legal or leaks, the narrative will explode." The general counsel shook his head slowly. "If this leaks, it won't be about one rogue branch. It'll be about us. The culture, the blind spots, the hypocrisy," someone muttered. "Oh, we built an entire brand around equity banking, and now their CEO had been racially profiled, humiliated, and turned away on camera by employees they had promoted, protected, and praised. The weight of it wasn't just legal, it was existential." Then came the line that sealed it. Angela's voice from the footage, calm and powerful. "You should remember this moment, not because I'll repeat it, but because you will." It landed in the boardroom like thunder in a chapel. The chairman looked at Diane. "What does she want?" Diane answered carefully. "She hasn't said, but if you know Angela, she doesn't want heads to roll. She wants roots to be pulled." Silence again. Then the chairman exhaled, defeated. "Get her in here," Diane shook her head. "She's not coming." "Why not?" "Because she's already moving. And this is just the beginning." Angela didn't wait for a phone call. She didn't need a written apology. She wasn't looking for a press conference or a teary-eyed, "We made a mistake," because she knew something the board hadn't learned yet. True power doesn't demand apologies, it issues consequences. By the time the board finished watching the footage, Angela was already in her office, downtown, glass walls, minimal decor, a single orchid blooming on her desk. She didn't pace, she typed precisely every keystroke, a calculated step in the blueprint she'd written months ago. A file labeled Monarch Reimagined, a people-first financial system. She opened it, read it once, then hit send to all senior executives. The message was simple, subject immediate implementation, phase 1. Dear team, as of this afternoon, we are enacting phase 1 of our internal equity restructure. This is not reactionary. This is overdue. Attached, you'll find 1 anonymous evaluation protocols. No name, no race, no gender. Just facts. 2. Community Equity Index. All branch performance will now be made public by demographic distribution. Leadership Reformation Pipeline. All managerial promotions will undergo third-party cultural fluency audits. 4 real-time experience ratings. Clients can now review interactions directly with results visible to regional leadership. This isn't a branding fix. This is a foundational rebuild. A free man. She didn't ask for input. She delivered the new standard. The moment the email landed in their inboxes, Diane's phone buzzed again. "Angela," she answered quickly. "We're ready to respond," but Angela interrupted gently. "No need, it's already begun. You don't want us to issue a statement." Angela's voice was steady. "I don't need a statement, Diane. I need a structure that doesn't require a black woman in power to be treated like one. I need a system that doesn't need to be tested. To be just." Diane was silent. Angela continued. "They don't need to see my pain. They need to feel their proximity to collapse. And if they can't feel that now, they're in the wrong building." Then she hung up. No drama, no threats, just motion, the kind that doesn't shake the walls. It rebuilds them. It was just after 10 a.m. when the black SUV pulled up. The same doors that had once seen Angela Freeman turned away in silence, now opened automatically as if the building itself knew who was walking in this time. She didn't come alone. Behind her, Diane Porter, 2 board members, and the director of internal ethics. No media, no press, just presence. Angela walked in wearing the same calm suit she had worn the week before, but everything about her was different now. She didn't look like a customer. She looked like a decision walking on 2 feet. Inside the lobby, the air froze. Beth's eyes widened. Jessica stood mid-sentence with a client and faltered. Mark dropped the folder in his hand. Richard didn't even look up. Not yet. But then Jessica spoke. "Can I help you?" Angela didn't stop walking. She passed the front counter, eyes fixed forward, only pausing when she reached the center of the lobby. Then calmly she turned. The employees who had spoken over her, laughed at her, questioned her identity, were now shrinking into silence. "I believe," Angela said softly. "We have unfinished business." Diane stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "Per directive from the office of the CEO," she said clearly, "this branch is under immediate review. The following personnel are hereby placed on administrative leave pending termination procedures." She began reading the names: Jessica, Mark, Richard. Each one froze. Jessica tried to speak. "There's been a misunderstanding." Angela raised one hand. No shouting, no grandstanding, just silence that commanded the room. "This isn't personal," she said. "This is structural. You were never the problem. You were the proof." Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. No words came. Beth, standing behind the teller's line, looked like she wanted to disappear. Angela noticed her but said nothing. Not yet. She walked slowly to the counter, the same one she had stood at while being denied her own money. Then she turned once more, this time addressing everyone, staff and customers alike. "You judged me because you didn't recognize me. That's fine. But what you revealed in the process was how you treat people when you think they have no power." Then she simply said, "I saw enough. Now you will too." And with that, the doors to the back opened and a new team walked in. Auditors, review officers, HR observers, the quiet army of accountability. Jessica staggered back. Mark looked pale. Richard still said nothing, because what could he say? Angela didn't destroy them. They did that themselves. She just brought the light. Beth stood still, hands clasped tightly in front of her, face pale, eyes darting, searching for a place to hide, but finding none. When Angela had first walked in that day as a stranger, Beth hadn't mocked her, hadn't joined the laughter, hadn't even said much at all. But she had also looked away, and now as the room shifted, power redistributed, names removed, futures rewritten, Beth braced for her name to be called next. Angela approached her, slowly pausing just beyond the teller window. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then Angela spoke, not loud, but direct. "You saw everything," she said. Beth nodded barely. "You heard it? You knew it was wrong?" Beth's voice cracked. I did. Why didn't you speak?" Beth's lips trembled. "Because I thought, if I did, I'd lose everything." Angela let that hang. It was the answer she expected, the answer she once lived herself. So she said nothing at first, just looked at her long enough for Beth to feel the full weight of the silence between them. Then Angela spoke again, slower this time. "You didn't protect me, but you also didn't betray me. And in this place, that's rare enough to matter." Beth blinked back, sudden tears. Angela turned to Diane and said, "Effective immediately, Beth Anderson will serve as interim branch manager." The room gasped. Beth's knees nearly buckled. "But only under one condition," Angela added, now turning fully to face her. Beth nodded quickly. "Desperate. Anything." Angela stepped closer. "You will never look away again." Beth's breath caught in her throat. Angela continued, "Not when it's uncomfortable, not when it's unpopular, and not when the person on the other side of the counter doesn't look like your idea of who belongs." Beth nodded. "Hard. I won't," she whispered. "I swear." Angela nodded once. Then turned to leave, saying over her shoulder, "You're not being rewarded. You're being watched differently now. Use it well." And just like that, the woman who had once been dismissed as just another customer walked out again. But this time the door didn't close behind her. It opened for something new. Something earned and something ready to begin again, with eyes wide open. Angela didn't rush. She didn't need to. Every step toward the door echoed through the marble lobby, not loud but final. Behind her, the silence was different now. It wasn't dismissive, it was reverent. An afraid Beth stood straight there, in hands still shaking, but now filled with something close to resolve. Jessica sat slumped in the corner, lips pressed into silence, her clipboard abandoned like a fallen crown. Mark was gone, escorted out 5 minutes earlier. Richard never spoke again. And the customers, they didn't whisper this time, they just watched. Watch the woman they had once seen as a nobody now walk with the certainty of someone who owned not just the building but the truth inside it. Angela paused at the door, not for effect, just for breath and perhaps to let it all settle. Then she turned halfway, not fully, just enough for her voice to carry. Respect isn't about who walks in, it's about how you treat them. Before you know who they are. No one responded. No one dared. She opened the door. The sunlight met her like a welcome back, and for the first time since she stepped foot into that place, the building felt smaller behind her, not because she had grown, but because they had finally shrunk to their true size without the shield of ignorance to make them feel taller. She walked to her car, didn't look back. She didn't need to. The lesson had already been delivered. And for once, they were the ones who couldn't look away. 7 days, that's all it took. In just 1 week, the headlines shifted from stock market speculation to structural awakening. No scandal press release, no viral outrage, just a bold, polished press briefing held on the 27th floor of Monarch Financial's headquarters. The company's logo gleamed behind Angela Freeman as she stepped up within the podium. Not as the victim of discrimination, not as a figurehead, but as the architect of a system reborn. She didn't begin with a greeting. She began with a sentence. We don't get to choose the moment that exposes us, but we do get to choose what we build after it. Flashes from cameras lit up the room. Behind her on screen appeared 4 words. The Freeman reform begins. She laid it out piece by piece. No fluff, just change. 1 blind service protocol. All transactions, loan reviews, and account escalations now initiated without visibility to name, photo, race, or gender. Decision makers only see data, behavior, and compliance. 2. Public equity dashboards. Each branch's approval rates, complaint resolutions, and demographic service breakdowns will be published quarterly, available to the public down to the zip code. Sunlight doesn't just expose bias, Angela said. It heals what we hide through leadership accountability audits. Every executive and branch manager will undergo annual third-party cultural fluency assessments. Promotion decisions tied not only to results, but to how those results were earned. 4. Real-time branch ratings. All customers can now rate their in-branch experience directly from their mobile app or kiosk. Feedback sent instantly to the regional director's desk. Silence, Angela said, will no longer be the bank's policy. The room was still, no applause yet, just absorption, because they all understood what this meant. This wasn't just a response to a mistake. This was a blueprint for how power should behave when it finally sees itself clearly. Angela closed the presentation with words that didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded earned. I don't want this to be a revolution. I want this to become the new standard. Because the real injustice is how many people had to suffer before someone like me had the authority to say enough. Then she stepped back. No mic drop, just reform in motion. And as the news broke across Wall Street, Capitol Hill, and financial districts across the country, the message was clear. The Freeman reform isn't just a change in banking, it's a change in who banking is finally for. They watched it unfold on television. Jessica, now unemployed, sat in her modest apartment, curtains half drawn, remote, clutched in hand. On screen, CNBC. A suited anchor declared, following the Freeman reform, multiple Fortune 500 banks are scrambling to adopt similar equity-based systems. Experts say this could redefine American banking for the next decade. Next to her, a breaking news banner scrolled, JP Magnus adopts Freeman metrics for leadership training. Equibank pilots, Freeman protocols in 40 branches. Federal Oversight Panel cites Freeman framework as industry best practice. Jessica turned off the TV, but the silence didn't help because it was everywhere now. LinkedIn posts from former peers quoting Angela's words. Training seminars titled Applying the Freeman Standard Panels in DC, called Beyond Apologies. Lessons from Angela Freeman. Even her old branch, under new leadership, now had a bronze placard near the front door. This location participates in the Freeman Equity Index. All interactions are logged for fairness, transparency, and public review. Mark, once smug behind the teller glass, now scanned his phone for job listings. At the bottom of one corporate hiring site, he saw the words, applicants must pass cultural fluency, evaluations, Freeman certified training preferred. He closed the tab. Richard, still bitter, still blaming cancel culture, flipped through news channels only to hear his name mentioned, and not directly but by implication as part of a case study in what happens when unchecked behavior meets unflinching leadership. And Beth, now fully instated as the new branch manager, Her office held no plaques, no trophies, just a single quote framed on the wall. The one Angela had told her on the day everything changed: "You're not being rewarded. You're being watched differently now. Use it well." And Beth did every day, because she had seen the cost of silence and been given a second chance. Not many receive. As for Angela, she didn't chase recognition, but it found her. Her name had become policy. Her silence had become precedent. Her justice had become architecture. And those who once doubted her now lived in a world reshaped by her footsteps. Not out of vengeance, but out of vision. Angela Freeman never planned to be a symbol. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't crave applause. All she ever wanted was to walk into a room and be treated like she belonged without needing to prove she did. But the world doesn't always give that freely. Sometimes it gives you a door slammed in your face and asks if you still have the grace to build another building altogether. Angela did. She didn't scream. She didn't fight with fists. She fought with systems, with strategy, with the kind of patience that makes injustice sweat. And in doing so, she taught us something powerful: that the most dangerous thing you can do to someone underestimated is give them reason to remember. Because while others mocked, she watched while they dismissed. She documented while they denied her worth. She designed their replacement, and now her name lives in policies, in bank hallways, in hiring protocols, in justice. So if you've ever been talked over, if you've ever been asked to explain your worth, if you've ever been looked at like you didn't fit the room you were already qualified to lead, don't just fight for a seat at the table. Become the architect of the room, because silence is not weakness. Calm is not surrender, and power, real power, walks in without needing to be announced, just like Angela did. And when she left, she made sure no one would ever forget who she was again.